I never understood why people tear down some of the greatest players we've ever seen just because they weren't able to win a championship. Players like LeBron, Carmelo, KD, and Giannis have seen so many other great players come before them, measured simply by how many championships they won, and it's unfortunate. Obviously, whether someone wins a championship is the ultimate measure of team success, but just because a player wasn't able to win a ring doesn't mean that they were a failure. But today, many players believe that. Now it's gotten to the point where guys have sort of been trained to think it's the end-all be-all, but it's not. That starts with the recognition that not all championships are created equal. The 2 rings where LeBron won in Miami are more about the ability to work with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. Now the 2016 title he won for the city when he returned home to a bad team with Kevin Love not yet on the team led a franchise to its historic first title. Now that one has immense value. Players do what the culture tells them to do. That's why, if you ask me, I understand why so many players today decide to form super teams. It's the new wave. Stars feel like they need to win championships to validate themselves, and they're willing to get it by any means necessary. We the people created a situation where there's more credit given to Durant or LeBron for blatantly ring chasing rather than winning a championship with their home team that drafted them. Context of the situation matters because there are so many players who ring chase, and when they got their first one, their legacy relatively stays the same. The first person that comes to mind when I say this is Dwight Howard when he won a championship with the Lakers in 2020. Now he did get his first ring, but when you look at his career, does that ring really make you think twice about him? Not really. Now if he'd won it in 2009 on the Magic, that would have been a real achievement on his resume, but winning one 11 years later just isn't the same. It's not uncommon to see NBA players make significant efforts to land their first championship at the end of their career. Some players force trades, others sign cheap contracts, and others come out of retirement to sign contracts. For players like these moves are strictly to win a championship ring, nothing else. These players are no longer looking for individual success and significant playing time. They're looking to provide some value, but not as much as they did when they were in their prime, just enough to get over the hump. Players like Gary Payton, Jason Kidd, Clyde Drexler, they all won a championship at the end of their careers, but it's not as notable if they would have done it in their prime. When you think of those players, does the fact that they won a championship really change your opinion of them? Because for me it doesn't. Their legacies as players were already defined, and them just adding a championship ring by ring chasing really doesn't tip the scales anyway. But if a player didn't win a ring, they would get clowned, and the main example of this is Charles Barkley. Charles Barkley is a prime example of how ring culture has sucked the life out of what it means to have a successful NBA career. For a career, Barkley averaged 22.1 points per game while grabbing 11.7 rebounds. Barkley never got back to the finals after running into Michael Jordan in 1993. His job now on TNT, he's constantly harassed by Shaquille O'Neal about his lack of winning a championship. For Shaq, Barkley's lack of a championship disqualifies him for commenting on anything that they disagree on. Jordan also prevents one of the best duos ever from winning a one. Karl Malone and John Stockton were great for so long. Karl Malone is the second leading scorer in NBA history. With him and John Stockton, the Utah Jazz came close a couple of times, but they could just never beat the GOAT. It got even worse for the mailman when he tried to go to the Lakers and win one. They ended up being upset by Detroit in 2004. It's like people try to diminish Malone's statue as a player, let me make that clear, as a player, because he was 0-3 in the finals. Again, we're talking about the number 2 scorer in NBA history, but since he doesn't have a ring, his legacy isn't remembered as great. The last example of someone that doesn't get a ring, but is clowned for not having one, is Reggie Miller. He ran into 3 of the greatest players of all time. He couldn't get past Jordan in the East, but when he retired, the Pacers finally made it to the finals where they ran into a young Kobe and Shaq. Reggie never got one, but his loyalty is his legacy. And I could see the same thing happening to Damian Lillard if he doesn't leave Portland. Damian Lillard is convinced that they'll win a championship there. I don't think that's going to happen. People for years have been telling him to ring chase, but if he does, he better do it soon, because if he switches teams at the end of his career, people won't recognize the ring as the same value as if he changed right now. So we see there are 2 choices players can choose when they haven't won a ring in their career. One is ring chasing, and one is staying with their team trying to win one. Now, for me, I think staying with your team and trying to win one in your prime is more important than ever ring chasing. I think a good example would be Dirk Nowitzki. If he had never won a championship for the Dallas Mavericks, would he still be remembered the same? To me, I think he would be. He's a great player, stayed loyal, and he put up the numbers. He's still one of the greatest power forwards of all time. The thumbnail of the video is Chris Paul because I believe he's an interesting case. If he wins a championship now, does it really change his legacy? It does, in the sense of people might not call him a playoff choker, but he's still going to be a top 5 point guard of all time, and just having that extra thing on his resume isn't that big of a difference. An example of a person chasing a ring in their prime would be Kevin Durant. He went to Boston and won one, and even though he was far away from his 2004 season, people remember him as a champion. Reducing every player's production to one number, ring total, has created an environment where Kevin Durant sees more value in latching on to Golden State than winning one at OKC. The 2 championships he won won't have an asterisk next to him in the book, but in people's minds they will always be less than the titles the other greats won. At the end of the day, every player dreams of holding up the Larry O'Brien trophy and hearing their names called out on ring night. It's an experience that guys spent their entire lives pursuing. But somewhere along the way, it seems like an entire generation of basketball players and fans were led to believe that careers were meaningless without a championship. I understand it, but I just wish it wasn't that way. And to some extent, I think we should be pointing the fingers at ourselves for making this the culture that we live in.